She was 30 years old. She had been married 4 months. On the morning of August 21st, 2004, she laced up her trail shoes, kissed her husband, and drove to the Hotchkiss Mesa trailhead for a run she had done dozens of times before. She did not come home. That is not a story about a woman who went running. That is a story about a man who attended her wedding. A man who was in 4 of the photographs from that day. A man who raised a glass at the toast, who stood in the background of the group shot at the bar, who had shaken the groom's hand and moved through the reception like someone who had every right to be there. Because at the time, everyone believed he did. It would take 20 years, a forensic genealogy laboratory, and a wedding album that Claire Cahill's family had opened hundreds of times in grief, to finally understand what they had been looking at. But before we get to that moment, before we get to the afternoon, an investigator laid 4 photographs on a conference table and pointed to a man no one had ever thought to question. We have to go back to western Colorado in the summer of 2004. Because to understand what was taken when Claire Cahill didn't come home, you first have to understand who Claire Cahill was. The North Fork Valley sits in the western slope of Colorado, tucked between the Grand Mesa and the Black Canyon of the Gunnison, a stretch of the state that grows most of its peaches and a significant portion of its apples, and that has spent the last century being exactly what it is, without making a particular effort to be anything else. Hotchkiss, the largest town in the Upper Valley, had a population of 900 in 2004. The streets were quiet by 8 in the morning and busier by noon. The orchards along the Gunnison River tributary had been producing since the 1880s, and in August they smelled of warm fruit and irrigation water, and the particular sweetness of a summer that has reached its peak and knows it. Claire Rourke had grown up in Delta, 12 miles south, the valley's largest city, a place of 7,000 people, and a downtown that had figured out how to hold on to its hardware stores and its diners without becoming a museum of itself. She had gone to Colorado State for her undergraduate degree and come back with a degree in kinesiology and a plan. Get her doctorate in physical therapy, return to the valley, open a practice. She had done it in that order. By 2004, she was the sports rehabilitation lead at Delta Physical Therapy on Meeker Street, where her colleagues said she could look at the way a person walked across the parking lot and have a reasonable working hypothesis before they reached the front desk. She was 30 years old. She married Jason Cahill on April 17, 2004, in a ceremony at a ranch outside Olathe that was attended by 140 people, most of whom had known one or both of them since grade school. Jason had grown up 3 blocks from Claire. They had been together, off and on, and then firmly on, since their junior year of high school. They had the particular ease of people who have known each other long enough to have already had their hardest conversations. They were trying to start a family. They had not told anyone yet. Claire had been running trails in the North Fork Valley since she was 22, not as exercise exactly, but as the thing she did when she needed to think, which was different from exercise in ways she could explain to her patients, but preferred not to. She was training that summer for the Imogene Pass Run, a notoriously difficult mountain race near Telluride that she had been circling on the calendar for 3 years. She kept a training log, a spiral notebook, 1 per year, going back 7 years. Every run recorded: date, distance, time, weather, and 1 sentence about how she felt. The notebooks were on the shelf above the desk in the spare room, arranged in order, the spines facing out. The last entry in the 2004 notebook is dated August 20th. North Fork Loop, 6.2 miles, hot, ready for fall. The entry for August 21st is blank. At 6:45 on the morning of August 21st, 2004, Claire told Jason she was heading out for a run. She said she'd be back by 9. She took her keys, her water bottle, and the small flip phone she always carried but rarely needed on the trail because the reception on the mesa was unreliable, and she preferred the quiet. At 7:15, she pulled into the Hotchkiss Mesa Trailhead parking area. At some point between 7:15 and 10 a.m., the Athens Summer Olympics were entering their 9th day. Michael Phelps had won his 4th gold medal the previous evening. The world was watching. In the North Fork Valley, the orchards were being harvested. At Tenzak, a man named Walt Gruber returned to the Hotchkiss Mesa Trailhead after his own morning hike. He noticed a man he did not recognize standing near the parking area entrance, not at a vehicle, not preparing to hike, just standing, watching the trail. Heavy-set, about 45 years old, a green canvas jacket which struck Gruber as warm for August. The man's truck was in the far corner of the lot. Gruber did not think much of it. He got in his own car and drove home. At 11 how, Jason Cahill noticed Claire had not returned. At 11:30, he tried her phone. No signal. At noon, he drove to the trailhead. Her car was in the lot. The doors were locked. Her water bottle was not inside it. By 1:00 p.m., Jason called the Delta County Sheriff's Department. By 3, a search team was at the trailhead. By 6, 22 volunteers were moving through the upper switchbacks on the mesa. The following morning, searchers found one of Claire's trail shoes on the main path, 1.5 miles from the trailhead. Her water bottle was found 30 yards off the trail in the brush. On the second day of the search, a dog team located Claire's body in a ravine 2 miles from the trailhead parking area. She had not fallen. The manner of her death, as determined by the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, was homicidal violence. One entry in the supplemental reports from the first week of the investigation would not be connected to a suspect for 20 years. Walt Gruber, contacted after the public information request ran in the Delta County Independent, described a heavy-set man of approximately 45 in a green canvas jacket who had been standing at the Hotchkiss Mesa Trailhead at approximately 10 on the morning of August 21st, watching the trail entrance rather than using it. Gruber had not recorded the truck's plate number. He had not thought anything was wrong at the time. He said he wished he had looked more carefully. The lead investigator was Delta County Sheriff's Detective Sandra Boone, 38 years old, 11 years on the job, experienced and methodical in the particular way of investigators who work small jurisdictions and understand that every person they interview has 3 other people watching. She ran a tight case. She visited the Cahill family twice in the first month and gave them every honest update she had, which in the early weeks was less than she would have liked. The early investigation focused on 2 individuals. The first was a man named Dale Pryor, a former patient at Delta Physical Therapy who had filed a billing dispute with the clinic 8 months earlier and who had, in the hearing of a receptionist, made a comment about Claire that the receptionist had not initially reported because she had not thought it was serious. Pryor was interviewed. His movements on August 21st were confirmed by 2 witnesses. He was in Grand Junction for a truck parts appointment, time-stamped by a service receipt and confirmed by the parts counter clerk. He was eliminated. The second was a man who owned land adjacent to the Hotchkiss Mesa Trailhead and who had a prior DUI and a reputation among his immediate neighbors for a short temper. He was interviewed twice. He had been at a family gathering in Paonia on August 21st, confirmed by 11 people, including photographs. He was eliminated. Walt Gruber's description, heavy-set, 45, green jacket, unknown truck, was circulated within the valley. It matched no one the investigation had yet connected to Claire. In the weeks after the murder, investigators examined the Cahill wedding photographs as part of the effort to map Claire's social world. The photographs were gone through systematically, and names were collected for the faces investigators could identify. Some people in the background of the reception shots, distant relatives, friends of friends, guests of guests, were not identified, because the methodology in 2004 was to follow connections from the center outward, stopping when a connection seemed too remote to be relevant. A heavy-set man visible at the bar in the cocktail hour photographs, and again in the background of the group photograph taken with Jason's uncle Robert, was noted as unidentified and not pursued further. He appeared to be a guest of the Cahill side. He was not a threat anyone was looking for. His name was Kenneth Dre. While Boone worked the available leads, Jason Cahill's family gathered around him in the specific and helpless way that families gather when the thing that happened is too large to help with, and they have come anyway. Paula Rourke Montes, Claire's older sister, the one who had given the wedding toast and who had been standing next to Claire in the first photographs of the morning, drove from Durango 3 days after the murder and did not leave for 2 weeks. She sat at the kitchen table with Jason. She helped return phone calls. She made a list of everyone who had been in contact with Claire in the weeks before she died and gave it to Boone without being asked. She had the wedding album in her house in Durango. She had been looking at it since April. She knew every face in it. She did not know the man at the bar. By 2007, Sandra Boone had exhausted the active leads in the Cahill case. There were no new witnesses, no new physical evidence, no developed suspects. Kenneth Dre had moved from the Delta County area to Grand Junction in 2006, 60 miles west, where he rented a house in a neighborhood off Mesa Avenue and found occasional work doing landscaping and property maintenance. He kept to himself. His new neighbors knew little about him. By 2009, Jason Cahill had sold the house on 4th Street in Delta that he and Claire had rented together. He moved to Fort Collins. He kept Claire's training notebooks in a cardboard box. He kept the 2004 notebook at the top, accessible, the way people keep things they are not ready to put fully away. By 2012, Claire's father, Ed Rourke, died of complications from diabetes. He had spent 8 years attending every meeting Boone or her successors would agree to hold. He had never received an answer. His wife Diane continued their family's contact with the sheriff's department. By 2015, Paula Rourke Montes had taken over as the family's primary point of contact with law enforcement. She filed public records requests. She attended victim advocacy conferences in Denver. She called the Colorado Bureau of Investigation twice a year, in spring and in fall, because she had decided that twice a year was the interval at which she could maintain the calls without them becoming routine. She kept the wedding album on the shelf in her study. She opened it on Claire's birthday and on the anniversary of her death. She knew every face and every photograph. She had been looking at him for 20 years. Every case on this channel represents weeks of research, verifying facts, and piecing together lives that deserved far better. If you want us to keep uncovering the truth behind stories like this one, please take a second to like and subscribe. Drop a comment and tell us where in the world you're watching from. Now let's get back to Claire. Then, in 2022, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation launched a cold case DNA review program targeting unsolved homicides from 1995 to 2010, where biological evidence had been properly preserved. Claire Cahill's case was in the first cohort selected for review. The evidence from her running jacket, collected at the scene in 2004 by a CBI evidence team and maintained at the CBI laboratory in Lakewood, had been refrigerated and logged for 18 years. It had never been submitted for genealogical analysis, because that technology had not existed in 2004. Now it did. Special Agent Marcus Webb was 42 years old and had worked the CBI cold case unit for 5 years when the Cahill file was assigned to him in early 2023. He read Sandra Boone's original investigation in 2 sittings. He read it a second time, more slowly. He found Walt Gruber's supplemental statement. He found the wedding photograph notation, unidentified background figures, inquiry not pursued, too remote from known connections. He put those 2 things side by side and held them there. In October 2023, the biological evidence from Claire's running jacket was submitted to a forensic genealogy laboratory in Salt Lake City. The process works, in plain terms, by uploading crime scene DNA to public ancestry databases, the same platforms that millions of people use to trace their family histories, and then working backward through the genetic matches, generation by generation, cousin by cousin, until every path leads to the same unknown contributor. The results arrived on a Thursday morning in January 2024. Webb opened the report. The genealogy match had resolved to a family cluster in Mesa County, Colorado. Grand Junction. He built the family tree over 6 days. Each branch required a different direction, a different set of second and third cousins. But the center held constant. One name appeared at the intersection of every branch he traced. Kenneth Dre. He ran it through the system. Kenneth Dre, 65 years old. Grand Junction, Colorado. He ran the address history. Delta County, Colorado, 2001 to 2006. He ran the employment history in Colorado, landscaping, property maintenance, seasonal ranch work. Then he ran the Arizona record. What came back was a 1998 arrest for sexual assault in Maricopa County, Arizona. A plea agreement, a suspended sentence. And in 2001, under an Arizona statute that permitted expungement of certain convictions after 5 clean years, a cleared record. Kenneth Dre had moved to Colorado the same year his Arizona record was legally erased. He had arrived in the North Fork Valley with no criminal history that any Colorado background check would find. He had met Claire Rourke at a neighborhood gathering in 2002. He had attended her wedding as the +1 of Jason's Uncle Robert, who had employed him for seasonal work the previous year. Webb called Sandra Boone. She was 58, retired, living in Montrose. She answered on the second ring. He read her the name. There was a pause. Then she said, "Run me the address history again." He did. She was quiet for a moment. Then, "He was in the wedding photos, the ones we couldn't identify." She did not say it as a question. Webb said, "I need to look at the album." Kenneth Dre had presented himself in the North Fork Valley as a semi-retired rancher from Arizona. Quiet, self-sufficient, the kind of man who fixed things on his own property without asking for help, and who rarely gave his neighbors a reason to think about him in either direction. He had attended Claire's wedding as the guest of Jason's Uncle Robert, who knew him from 2 seasons of shared ranch work and described him afterward, when investigators finally asked in 2024, as a decent hand who mostly kept to himself. Robert Cahill said he had thought nothing of bringing him to the wedding. He said he was sorry he had. The DNA warrant for Kenneth Dre was approved by a Mesa County District Court judge on February 8, 2024. Investigators executed it 5 days later, collecting a sample without incident. The laboratory returned its analysis in 6 days. The match was confirmed. Webb then called Jason Cahill, who was living in Fort Collins and who cooperated fully and without hesitation with every request the investigation made of him. He arranged for the wedding album to be delivered to the CBI regional office in Grand Junction. Webb reviewed the album with a photograph analyst. They found Kenneth Dre in 4 images. In the first, he was standing at the bar during the cocktail hour, a glass in his hand, face turned toward someone off camera, smiling in the easy way of a man who is comfortable where he is. In the second, he was on the edge of the dance floor during the first open song, partially obscured by another couple but clearly recognizable. In the third, he was standing with Robert Cahill in a group of 4 men, photographed near the tent entrance, the only photograph in which his face was fully forward-facing. In the 4th, the toast photograph, taken at the moment Jason raised his glass for the first time as Claire's husband, Dre was visible in the background. His glass was raised. He was smiling. Webb drove to Durango on a Tuesday in March. Paula Rourke Montes came into the CBI field office on a quiet afternoon. Webb set 4 printed photographs on the conference table, face down. He told her what the DNA had found. He told her about the Arizona record. He told her about the wedding photographs. Then he turned them over. Paula looked at the first photograph for a long time. She knew exactly which one it was. She had the album at home. She had looked at the cocktail hour photographs at Claire's birthday, at Christmas, in quiet evenings when she missed her sister, and the album was the nearest thing to her. She had looked at the man at the bar, not as a person, just as a presence in the background of a day that belonged to someone else, not as someone to look at, as part of the scene. She looked at him now. "He was there," she said. Her voice was very level. Webb said, "He was there." She looked at each of the 4 photographs in turn. The dance floor, the group by the tent, the toast. Then she put her hands flat on the table and looked at nothing for a moment. "I gave the toast," she said. "He was standing in that photograph while I gave the toast." Webb did not say anything. 20 years, she said. "I've been looking at that photograph for 20 years. Kenneth Dre was arrested at his home in Grand Junction on April 3, 2024. 2 CBI agents and a Mesa County Sheriff's deputy arrived at 7:30 in the morning. He answered the door. He said nothing. He did not resist. He was calm, or appeared to be, in the way that some people appear calm when something they have been waiting for a long time has finally arrived. His neighbors in Grand Junction were shaken. They had not known him well. He had kept to himself in Grand Junction as he had in the North Fork Valley. But they were shaken regardless, in the particular way people are when they learn that the quiet man on the corner was the answer to a question a family had been asking for 20 years. He entered a not guilty plea through his attorney. He maintained it for 7 months. In November 2024, after prosecutors presented the complete evidence package, the DNA match, the reconstructed Arizona record, Walt Gruber's timeline and physical description, the wedding photograph confirmation, and forensic analysis of the evidence from the trail, Dre changed his plea to guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison in January 2025. He said nothing at the sentencing hearing. Paula Rourke Montes was 57 years old on the day Kenneth Dre was sentenced. She stood at the podium in the Delta County courtroom and spoke for 8 minutes. She had written and rewritten the statement over a period of weeks, and she read it without looking up. She said she had given the toast at Claire's wedding, that she had been so nervous in the days before that she had practiced it in the mirror every morning for 2 weeks, and so nervous at the actual moment that she had barely been able to hold the microphone steady. She said it had been the best thing she had ever written, and the most frightened she had ever been delivering it, and that Claire had cried the whole way through, which meant it had worked. She said that when she learned the man who killed her sister had been in the photograph taken at that exact moment, she had sat in her car for a long time before she could drive home. She said she was not going to describe what she had felt when she understood what she had spent 20 years not seeing. She said she was not sure there was language for it. She said Claire had been going to be a mother. She said Claire had been training for a mountain race she never got to run. She said Claire had 7 years of training notebooks on a shelf in the spare room, and the last entry in the last notebook was the day before she died, and that the handwriting was exactly what Paula expected it to be, efficient, clear, entirely Claire's, and that the blank page after it was the thing she could not stop thinking about. The entry for August 21st is blank. Everything after it is blank. Jason Cahill sent the 2004 notebook to Paula after the sentencing. It is on the shelf in her study in Durango, next to the wedding album. There is a photograph of Claire Cahill taken at the Delta Physical Therapy Clinic in the spring of 2004, 3 months before she disappeared. She is standing in the rehabilitation gym beside a patient relearning to walk after a knee replacement surgery. Her hand is on his shoulder, steadying him, and both of them are looking at the floor ahead of him, entirely focused on the next step. She is 30 years old. She is doing exactly the work she trained to do. In the months following Dre's conviction, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation developed a new investigative protocol, formally adopted in March 2025, requiring systematic identification of every person visible in victim photographs during homicide investigations, not only those with confirmed relationships to the victim. The protocol was developed directly in response to the Cahill case, where a perpetrator had been visually documented in the victim's wedding photographs in 2004. Noted as an unidentified background figure and not pursued, the new protocol uses facial recognition cross-referenced with law enforcement databases and social mapping to ensure that no person visible in a victim's record passes unexamined. It has been adopted by 6 additional Colorado counties and is under consideration at the state level for mandatory implementation. The little peach orchard sign on the road into the North Fork Valley still stands. The clinic where Claire worked still has her photograph in the hallway by the reception desk, where her colleagues put it after she died and where no one has moved it in 20 years. Think about what the wedding photograph means, not as evidence, but as an object. Paula has the album. She has opened it at every Christmas, every birthday, every anniversary of Claire's death, for 20 years. She was looking for Claire in those photographs, the way people look for someone they've lost in the images they have left. She was not looking for Kenneth Dre. She had no reason to look for him. He was in the background. He was part of the day. He raised a glass. What does it mean to look at the same image for 20 years and not see what is in it? And what do you think about the Arizona expungement law, the statute that legally erased Dre's 1998 record and allowed him to move to Colorado and be, on paper, someone with no history? Is there a version of that law that makes sense to you? And should map every person in every victim photograph have been a standard protocol in 2004? Or is this a lesson that could only be learned the hard way? Justice found Claire Cahill after 20 years. Stories like hers are why this channel exists. If you believe truth is worth pursuing no matter how long it takes, subscribe. More cases are waiting in the description below. Thank you for being here.